What's it gonna be, Shane?
I want the ball.
Winners always do. Spread formation.
Sports movies usually celebrate greatness, but The Replacements tells a different story. It's about failure, second chances, and players nobody expected to matter. But behind the humor lies something stranger. 7 unexpected truths shape this film, and each one reveals a story you probably never noticed. Number 1. The real strike that inspired the story. The film begins like fiction, but its roots are uncomfortably real. The Replacements draws direct inspiration from the 1987 NFL strike, a moment when professional football fractured and replacement players took the field under scrutiny, pressure, and ridicule. What made that strike so unusual was not just the absence of star athletes, but the presence of men who were never meant to be seen. These were players from smaller colleges, semi-pro leagues, or careers that had already ended quietly. For a few fleeting weeks, they stepped into stadiums built for legends, and were asked to perform as if they belonged. Many didn't, but that uncertainty became the story itself. Director Howard Deutsch approached the material with restraint. He understood that beneath the comedy was a deeper question about worth, about how quickly opportunity appears and how quickly it disappears. As one former replacement player later reflected, "We weren't trying to replace anyone, we were just trying to prove we could stand there." The real players of 1987 were often mocked, even by fans. Some were labelled scabs, others dismissed as temporary placeholders. But for those players, the moment carried weight far beyond public perception. It was a chance to exist inside a dream that rarely opens twice. That fragile dignity, the need to belong, even briefly, became the emotional spine of the film. It transformed comedy into something quieter, more reflective. Because in the end, it was never about replacing greatness. It was about proving you were real. Number 2. Keanu Reeves took the role for redemption, not fame. At the time, Reeves was navigating a strange phase in his career, balancing blockbuster recognition with a desire to prove emotional depth. His decision to play Shane Falco was less about comedy and more about reclaiming vulnerability on screen. In the years leading up to The Replacements, Reeves had become widely recognizable, but not always taken seriously. Roles in films like Speed made him a global name, yet critics often questioned his range. There was a perception, quiet but persistent, that he was defined more by presence than performance. Falco offered something different, a quarterback marked by failure, carrying the weight of one defining mistake. Reeves leaned into that fragility. He trained physically, but more importantly, he softened his performance, allowing hesitation and doubt to shape the character. Director Howard Deutsch later reflected that Reeves brought a quiet sincerity, noting he played Falco not like a hero, but like someone still trying to believe he could be one.
Look, man, here comes Falco. Falco's back.
What happened to my town?
I don't know, but the way Falco's running there...
There is a subtlety in Reeves's performance that often goes unnoticed. He rarely overplays emotion. Instead, he lets silence carry it. Glances, pauses, the weight of expectation just beneath the surface. It is a performance built on restraint rather than spectacle, and that choice gives the character credibility, grounding even the film's more comedic moments. In that sense, the role becomes more than a comeback story. It becomes a quiet study of self-doubt, resilience, and perception, because sometimes redemption begins before anyone else believes it. Number 3. The football was real, painfully real. Unlike many sports comedies, the production leaned into physical authenticity. Actors trained intensely, performed real tackles, and absorbed real hits, blurring the line between performance and punishment. For The Replacements, realism was not just a visual goal, it was a physical demand. Many performers had limited football experience, yet they were expected to execute plays under conditions that mirrored real games. Pads were worn, but impact was not simulated. Hits landed with weight, timing mattered, and mistakes carried consequences. Keanu Reeves committed fully to that process. He trained with quarterbacks, studied mechanics, and insisted on performing his own throws during key sequences. The greater challenge was endurance. Scenes required repetition, often under pressure, with physical contact that could not be faked convincingly. As director Howard Deutsch noted, "We wanted it to feel like they were really earning every yard, not pretending to." What emerged was a tone that felt grounded, even when the story leaned toward comedy. Collisions looked awkward, movements less polished, but that imperfection added credibility. These were not elite players, they were replacements, and their struggle became part of the narrative. It gave every player a sense of risk and unpredictability. There was also risk involved. Injuries were minor but real. Bruises, strains, fatigue, building over long shooting days. That physical memory translated onto screen, shaping posture, hesitation, and reaction. In the end, the authenticity was not about spectacle, because when the hits are real, the story stops feeling like a game. Number 4. Gene Hackman almost didn't take the role. Hackman, known for authority and gravitas, initially hesitated. The idea of leading a light-hearted football film seemed out of step with his legacy, until the character revealed something deeper. By the time The Replacements entered production, Hackman had already built a career defined by control and intensity. Films like The French Connection and Unforgiven positioned him as a commanding presence. Jimmy McGinty, on paper, felt like a departure. What drew Hackman in was not the humor, but the quiet weariness behind the character. McGinty is not triumphant. He is returning to a game that once pushed him out, carrying unresolved weight. Director Howard Deutsch noted that Hackman approached the role as if the comedy was just the surface, and everything underneath was regret.
I'm not gonna make any promises, Shane, but why don't you take a chance, huh? Rather than hang out here scraping crap off the bottom of somebody else's toys.
Hackman's performance reflects that restraint. He rarely raises his voice or forces authority. Instead, he observes, measuring players, letting silence carry judgment. That subtlety grounds the film, keeping it from drifting into caricature and giving even quiet moments a sense of emotional gravity. There is also a sense of mentorship that feels earned rather than scripted. McGinty builds trust through recognition, seeing value in players others dismiss. That perspective mirrors the film's deeper theme. Worth is not always obvious, and belief often begins with someone else noticing. In the end, Hackman did not step into a comedy. He anchored it. Because sometimes authority is not about control. It is about knowing when to believe in someone else. Number 5. The cheerleaders had their own story. The film's unconventional cheerleading squad, formed during the strike, became one of its most memorable elements. But behind the humor was a subtle commentary on image, identity, and who gets to belong in professional spaces. In The Replacements, the cheerleaders mirror the players themselves, outsiders stepping into roles traditionally defined by strict expectations. They are not polished professionals, they are replacements. And like the team, they carry the burden of comparison, constantly measured against an ideal they were never meant to replicate. What makes these scenes resonate is not just the humor, but the tension beneath it. The performances are intentionally imperfect, slightly off rhythm, slightly out of sync, yet filled with effort. That contrast creates something more human. It reminds the audience that belonging is often negotiated, not granted. As one production note later reflected, the goal was to show a group that looked like they didn't fit, but refused to leave. There is also an undercurrent of defiance in how the squad is presented. They do not try to erase their differences. Instead, they lean into them, turning awkwardness into presence, hesitation into persistence. That choice reframes the joke. The audience may laugh at first, but gradually, the tone shifts. What seemed comedic begins to feel earned. In many ways, their arc reflects the film's larger theme. Identity is not about matching expectation, it is about sustaining effort despite it. Because sometimes belonging is not about fitting in, it is about staying visible long enough to be accepted. Number 6. The characters were inspired by real archetypes. From the washed-up quarterback to the overlooked lineman, each player reflects real stories from replacement athletes, men who briefly stepped into the spotlight, knowing it could disappear overnight. In The Replacements, these characters are exaggerated just enough to entertain, but grounded enough to feel familiar. Shane Falco, the quarterback defined by a past failure, echoes real players whose careers were shaped by a single moment. Others, like the anxious kicker or aging veteran, represent different forms of pressure: internal, external, and constant. What gives these portrayals weight is their origin. During the 1987 NFL strike, replacement players came from scattered paths, some chasing a final chance, others stepping into a dream they never expected. The film condenses those realities into recognizable figures, each carrying that same uncertainty. As one former player later described the experience, "You knew it could end any second, so every play felt like everything."
Sorry, Shane. Sorry, everybody.
No problem, Jumbo. Just make sure you rip someone's head off on this one.
Consider it done.
All right.
The film leans into contrast, confidence beside fear, discipline beside chaos. Some players appear ready, others clearly not, but all are given the same stage. That imbalance creates tension, but also authenticity. It reflects a truth often overlooked. Opportunity does not always arrive when you are prepared. There is also a quiet dignity in how these characters are treated. They are not reduced to jokes. Each one is given a moment to matter, however briefly. In the end, these are not just characters. They are reflections, because sometimes the most temporary roles reveal the most permanent truths. Number 7. It quietly became a cult classic. Despite modest expectations, the film endured, not because of its wins, but because of its honesty about losing, trying again, and finding dignity in unlikely places. When The Replacements was first released, it did not arrive with the weight of prestige. It was seen as a light sports comedy, entertaining, but not essential. Yet over time, something shifted. Audiences returned to it, not for spectacle, but for tone. There was a sincerity beneath the humor that felt increasingly rare. Part of that endurance comes from its refusal to follow a traditional arc. The film does not celebrate perfection. It embraces imperfection, missed plays, awkward moments, uncertain victories. That honesty allows viewers to connect beyond the game itself. As one critic later noted, the film understands that effort can be meaningful even when the outcome isn't flawless.
Dallas 17, Washington goes to the playoffs.
There is also a quiet relatability in its characters. They are not legends. They are temporary figures, aware that their moment may not last. That awareness changes the emotional weight of every scene. Success is not defined by dominance, but by persistence, by continuing despite doubt, despite expectation. Over the years, that perspective has resonated more deeply. Viewers recognize something familiar in it, the idea that most people are not stars, but participants, navigating moments that feel larger than they are. The film does not exaggerate that reality. It reflects it. In the end, its legacy was never loud. It was steady, because some stories do not endure by being the best, they endure by being true. What The Replacements ultimately leaves behind is not a story about football, but a story about permission. The permission to fail, to try again, and to matter even when the world isn't watching. Each of these moments, on and off the field, reveals something quieter about legacy. It is not always built on greatness. Sometimes it is built on persistence. Because most people are not remembered for perfect victories. They are remembered for showing up when it wasn't guaranteed to work, for stepping into roles they were never meant to hold, and holding them anyway, if only for a moment. That kind of courage rarely looks cinematic, but it is deeply human. That is why this film endures, not as spectacle, but as reflection. A reminder that effort, even when imperfect, still carries meaning. What moment from The Replacements stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts below. And if stories like this resonate with you, subscribe for more.